Hello, my name is Miss Wetherall, and I am Royal Wootton Bassett Academy's lead practitioner for its Holocaust, Genocide and Human Rights programme. As we approach July the 11th and the 25th anniversary of the genocide at Srebrenica in Bosnia, we have set our students, staff, parents and wider community a challenge. Personal challenges adapted from ideas our friends at Remembering Srebrenica shared with us that will help us all come together, albeit socially distanced and remotely at this time, to learn and to remember. As you can see, our school community, in partnership with our trust schools, Manor Academy and Kingsbury Green, are taking up at least one challenge to mark Srebrenica Memorial Day and this 25th anniversary. Through art, writing, their steps, silences or other means, they are coming to understand that every action matters. So for my personal challenge, I am creating these 9 short films to do my bit to inform and inspire others. These personal short films will hopefully help my students respond more deeply to Srebrenica 25 and support them in their challenges. But they're also a reflection on the journey I have taken personally and professionally, as I have encountered, taught and talked about Bosnia. Along the way, I have been enriched, informed and inspired by Bosnia's survivors, by partner organisations like Manor, Remembering Srebrenica and the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, and I will tell you more about them in these films. But also by fellow teachers, here in the UK and abroad, who are each innovatively and tirelessly committed to talking and teaching about Bosnia with their students. Having taught about Bosnia, the Holocaust and other genocides for almost 20 years, there are 2 takeaway lessons I'd like to point out from the start. The first is that no incident of genocide must come to define a country. In other words, Bosnia, like Cambodia or Rwanda, must be understood for its rich history, its geography and landscape, its art and culture, its food, and most importantly, its people. And with that richness, the conflicts, identity-based violence and genocide must indeed be understood. But Bosnia is so much more than genocide. The second is that no society is invulnerable to prejudice and intolerance. Rather, that we must all remain vigilant against these forces and take positive actions in our own communities to build stronger, more resilient societies. So with one final caveat and sincere apology to my Bosnian friends for my likely mispronunciation of places and names, no disrespect is intended, and having completed some intros, let's begin with that first lesson, the importance of context, and let's get a sense of Bosnia together and have a look at it on a map. Bosnia, as it's most commonly known, is about 1/3 of the size of England and situated in Eastern Europe. It's got approximately 3.5 million people. Before 1992, it was part of a federation or group of countries that made up the then Yugoslavia. Several of the federated or connected areas or countries that had made up Yugoslavia voted in the early 1990s to leave and declared independence. But the larger dominant region, Serbia, here pictured in the pink, rejected these calls. All of this was the trigger to war in 1992, and in the course of those wars that engulfed the area, it also led to atrocity, abuses of human rights, and ultimately to genocide in Srebrenica in 1995. So what is genocide, this thing that we've talked about in relation to Srebrenica? Genocide's a legal term, and it's very specific. It's quite a difficult and unpleasant word for young people to get their heads around. It means the killing, deliberate killing, of a large group of people, especially those of a particular national or ethnic group. But I want to show you a side of Bosnia, an important side of Bosnia, the wider context, and I think this photograph helps us with that a little bit. This is the stunning Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia today. It has a population of around 275,000 people, and it really is a melting pot of East meeting West. it hosted the Winter Olympics in 1984, and Torval and Dean did their famous Bolero at these games. It's a fabulous city in a beautiful, beautiful country. I had the opportunity 3 years ago through Remembering Srebrenica to travel to the country with a small delegation of teachers and influencers and so on. And we explored Sarajevo through a fantastic guide, Rashad, who himself is a survivor of the siege of Sarajevo, which we'll talk about later. And we got to see this beautiful, beautiful city with its river and its hills and its mountains and its minarets and its red rooftops and its business district. And although battered by war, it is just a stunning place. If you ever have the chance to travel there, you really ought to go. It is stunning. As an RE teacher, what struck me about Sarajevo, particularly in light of the war and what I knew about it, was the religious diversity that existed within the city. Here, pictured, are 4 places of religious worship. There is an Orthodox church, a Catholic cathedral, a synagogue, and a mosque. And they are all in the streets of Sarajevo. This community is diverse. It has been vibrant through the years. It has witnessed and celebrated religious inclusion, and a spirit of religious dialogue and tolerance has been fantastic over the years. So there is this history of diversity and inclusion, and the religious sites and the cemeteries are respected, and it's wonderful to see. So there is this backdrop. So that backdrop, that religious backdrop of East meeting West, is represented here in this beautiful shot, I think, of one of the sort of small market squares within the city, which really highlights the Ottoman influence upon the city and its architecture, and the way that the city looks. But in addition to the Ottomans and that sort of Muslim Eastern influence coming through, you'll also have the Austro-Hungarian influence that was very prominent in the city. And this is a picture of the inside of the city hall, and you can see some of those influences coming across there. Sarajevo really is a melting pot, not just of religious culture, but also of East meeting West, geographically, in terms of language, in style, in architecture, and in food and culture. It is quite an extraordinary and unusual place to visit. Of course, Sarajevo is also known for its links and connections to the First World War and the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. And so you can visit the spot, you can see that site in history, and clearly Sarajevo has been a centre of European history in the modern era, influencing in so many different ways that we need to know more about Bosnia, really, than what we probably normally would. And in addition to that, in the Second World War, Yugoslavia as a whole, Bosnia included, was occupied, was part of that axis. There was many Slavs taken to various camps for different reasons. There were all sorts of tensions with allegiances to the Nazis and their collaborators and the Ustasha and different elements to all of that. But there's a real history, and the consequences of that history during the Second World War indeed plays itself out in parts of what happens later in the 1990s in the war and the genocide that we're going to focus on in the other films. Tito led the country after the Second World War, and he illustrates through this quotation the difficulty of what he was trying to accomplish, to be a leader of a country that was made up of 2 different alphabets, 3 different languages, 4 religions, 5 nationalities, 6 republics, surrounded by 7 neighbours, and a country of 8 ethnic minorities. He really held the country together, and upon his death in the 80s, the countries that had made up Yugoslavia, the Federated Nations, each tried to find their own place in the world. They wanted either independence or to have more of a voice. They wanted to break away from this sort of collective identity. and that was going to prove, pivotal for the war that we would see unfold into the genocide at Srebrenica later on. But what are my Sarajevo memories? My memories of Sarajevo and of Bosnia are of incredible warmth of the people, of the beautiful river and the landscape of the city, which was just stunning. We were fortunate with the weather, I grant you, but it was just such a rich, vibrant city to visit, albeit peppered with shell holes and bullets into some of the sides of buildings, and some of the ruins of war were still very much to be seen. But what a beautiful, diverse city to visit. The coffee was extraordinary, as you can see in the little sort of brass platters and so on. It was something to behold. So you've got to have Bosnian coffee. The bazaars were full of colour and life and commerce, and the streets were full of tourists and visitors trying to soak up the history and the vibrancy of this extraordinary city. So my memories of Bosnia are very positive in Sarajevo. And then we had the opportunity through Remembering Srebrenica to travel to Srebrenica itself and to Tuzla. Those encounters were so memorable, so moving, so inspiring, but they were also quite difficult. So my memories of Bosnia, in the positive sense, tend to focus very much on this vibrant city of Sarajevo. But the complexities of the country and its extraordinary people and landscape were evident throughout the trip, and that's what I want to share with you in some of our other films. So this ethnic patchwork that Tito had tried to help hold together, and the thing that I found most exhilarating as an RE teacher, to see this diverse community in Sarajevo so prosper and thrive, would ultimately become a problem in the 1990s. It would become a problem when Bosnia votes or seeks independence away from Serbia and away from the other nations. Croatia does it first, but Bosnia then follows. And in doing so, its neighbours, Serbia, object to that, because obviously there's a patchwork in Bosnia, a mixture of Croats, of Serbs, and of Bosnian Muslims or Bosniaks. And so whereas Serbia is largely all pink and all Serbian, and Croatia was largely Croat, a clear majority of people, Bosnia, this melting pot, this mix of communities, was going to present a problem if it wanted independence away from Serbia and away from the capital in Belgrade. And so that's going to present the issue that we're going to consider over the next few films, in that how that vote triggered a conflict, triggered a war in which abuses took place for human rights, in which persecution took place, discrimination took place, a bloody, terrible war took place, and of course genocide in Srebrenica too. So that's what we're going to look at next time. But I wanted just to return to those personal challenges, and that every action matters. So we have here a Srebrenica flower and some ideas that our students, our staff, our community, and anybody else watching this film, if they feel inclined, can get involved to learn and to remember this Srebrenica Memorial Day. We'd love to see what you come up with, and we wish you well.